from getting attacked by a rabbit, to accidentally declaring war on a ghost country, to a president so drunk he got arrested mid-term. These are the most embarrassing moments in presidential history. And trust me, these guys were supposed to be the most powerful people on Earth. I am a bald eagle, and even I am cringing. Let us start with a founding father who set the tone for a presidential embarrassment early. John Adams was the second president of the United States. He was brilliant, Harvard-educated, and one of the key architects of the Constitution. So what is his embarrassing moment? He was demolished in an election by his own vice president. Back then, the runner-up in the presidential election became the vice president. After 4 rocky years in office, Adams faced Thomas Jefferson in 1800, and Jefferson annihilated him. Those 4 years included an undeclared war with France, the deeply unpopular Alien and Sedition Acts that essentially made it illegal to criticize the government, and a complete breakdown inside his own cabinet. To make it worse, Adams was so humiliated by the loss that he refused to attend Jefferson's inauguration. He woke up on inauguration morning, packed his bags, and left Washington, D.C. at 4 in the morning. That is not normal behavior. That is the presidential equivalent of leaving a party before anyone can ask you to help clean up. But Adams was not the only founding father to embarrass himself in office. James Madison, the so-called father of the Constitution, the man who helped design the American government, had the British burn his house down. In August of 1814, during the War of 1812, British forces marched on Washington, D.C. and set the White House on fire. And here is the kicker. Madison had to flee the capital on horseback, hiding in the Virginia countryside while the executive mansion burned. His wife, Dolly Madison, is remembered as a hero for staying behind and rescuing a full-length portrait of George Washington before the flames reached it. So the most famous act of courage that day came from his wife. Madison spent the night in a farmhouse. You designed the entire government, and you got evicted from it by the British. They burned your homework. But if that is embarrassing, wait until you hear about Andrew Jackson. He brought so many rowdy supporters to his own inauguration party that they trashed the White House. We are talking muddy boots on the furniture, broken china, fistfights on the lawn, and whiskey-soaked crowds so out of control that Jackson himself had to escape through a back window of his own home. To lure the mob outside, White House staff dragged barrels of whiskey and punch onto the lawn. It worked. The President of the United States sneaked out the back of the White House to escape a party he threw. Old Hickory, indeed. Now let us talk about someone who did not embarrass himself once. He did it on a loop. Ulysses S. Grant, the war hero who helped end the Civil War, was arrested for speeding while president. A police officer in Washington, D.C., pulled him over for driving his horse and buggy too fast. Grant paid a fine of $20 and walked home because his horse was impounded. Just let that sink in. The sitting president of the United States, the man who defeated Robert E. Lee, had his horse taken away by a traffic cop. Grant reportedly took it with good humor and said the officer was right to do it, which somehow makes it even funnier. At least he had dignity about it. But Grant's speeding ticket is nothing compared to William Henry Harrison. He gave the longest inauguration speech in American history, nearly 2 hours in freezing weather, with no hat and no coat, acting like he was invincible because he wanted to prove he was tough enough for the job at 68. The embarrassing part is not the speech. The embarrassing part is that 31 days later, he was dead. He holds the record for the shortest presidency in United States history. He did not sign a single law. He made essentially no decisions. Historians now think it was typhoid from contaminated White House water, rather than the cold speech. But either way, the man spent more time writing his inauguration speech than being president. If there were a Hall of Fame for blowing a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Harrison would be a first ballot, unanimous pick. And then there was Grover Cleveland, who got caught in a spectacular lie in the middle of a financial crisis. In 1893, during the panic of that year, Cleveland secretly had surgery on his mouth to remove a cancerous tumor while on a yacht. The operation was kept secret, so the public would not learn the president was sick and panic what was left of the economy. A full surgical team performed the procedure at sea as Cleveland sat in a dentist chair, bolted to the deck. They removed part of his jaw and replaced it with a vulcanized rubber prosthetic. The White House told reporters he had 2 bad teeth pulled. The real story did not come out for nearly 25 years, when one of the surgeons finally wrote about it. So Cleveland did not just have secret surgery. He had secret jaw replacement surgery on a boat while running the country, then lied about it for decades. Sir, now we cannot talk about presidential embarrassment without visiting the single most personally humiliating moment in modern presidential history. And that belongs to Jimmy Carter. In 1979, President Carter was on a solo canoe trip in Georgia, which is apparently a totally normal thing for a president to do, when he was attacked by a swamp rabbit. A large, aggressive rabbit swam directly toward his canoe, hissing, and Carter had to beat it away with his paddle. When the story leaked to the press, it became known as the Killer Rabbit Incident. Editorial cartoons showed a terrified Carter fleeing a monstrous swamp rabbit. The White House tried to downplay it, but there was a photograph, an actual photograph of the president paddling furiously to fend off a rabbit. At a time when Carter was already dealing with the Iran hostage crisis and a catastrophic energy shortage, the last thing he needed was photographic evidence of him struggling with a bunny. He did not lose the rabbit fight, to be fair, but he also did not win it. No one wins a rabbit fight as president. But for sheer awkwardness on the world stage, George H.W. Bush might take the crown. In 1992, at a state dinner in Tokyo, Bush suddenly fainted, fell out of his chair, and vomited directly onto the Japanese Prime Minister, Kiichi Miyazawa, before the Secret Service could react. The whole thing was broadcast live on Japanese television. The Japanese even coined a new word for it, bushu suru. It became slang for vomiting or embarrassing yourself publicly. The leader of the free world became a verb in a foreign language. That is a legacy no one was aiming for. But for unrelenting, multi-year embarrassment, nothing tops Bill Clinton and the blue dress. You know the story. In 1998, after months of denying it publicly, including wagging his finger at the American people on national television and saying he did not have sexual relations with that woman, the evidence came out, the lie unraveled, and Clinton became only the second president in history to be impeached by the House of Representatives. He survived the Senate trial and served out his term. But the image of that finger wag, that absolute commitment to a story that was already collapsing, became one of the most replayed clips in presidential history. The embarrassment was not just the scandal, it was the confidence of the denial. George W. Bush handed the internet one of its most beloved presidential moments in 2005 when he tried to exit a press conference through a locked door in China. In front of reporters, cameras, and the entire world, Bush grabbed the handle, pulled it, rattled it, tried again, and the door did not open. He turned around, laughed awkwardly, and found the real exit. It was 12 seconds of footage the internet has never forgotten. And look, it is a locked door. It happens to everyone. But it happened to the President of the United States on a state visit to China, with cameras rolling. The metaphor jokes wrote themselves. And then there is Barack Obama, a man of effortless cool, who committed what might be the most awkward diplomatic gift moment of the modern era. In 2009, during an official meeting with Queen Elizabeth II at Buckingham Palace, Obama presented her with a customized music player loaded with his own speeches and American show tunes. The Queen had given him a silver-framed portrait, personally inscribed. He gave her a gadget. Royal commentators were polite, but the British press had a field day. To be fair, he also gave her a rare songbook signed by composer Richard Rodgers. But the gadget is what everyone remembers. You gave the 82-year-old monarch of one of America's most important allies a playlist, sir. But no list of presidential embarrassment would be complete
without Donald Trump and the 2 scoops of ice cream. In 2017, a magazine report said that at White House dinners, Trump received 2 scoops of vanilla ice cream while everyone else got one. It sounds trivial, but it became a cultural flashpoint. It was memed endlessly, debated on television, and printed on protest signs. And honestly, the fact that 2 scoops of ice cream became a political event is itself one of the most uniquely American, uniquely modern presidential embarrassments imaginable. 2 scoops. That is it. That broke the internet. And that brings us full circle. From John Adams sneaking out of Washington, D.C. at 4 in the morning, to presidents losing standoffs with rabbits, to the leader of the free world becoming a Japanese verb for vomiting. The presidency is the most powerful job on earth, but it turns out the people who hold it are still just people, capable of locked doors, secret surgeries at sea, and getting clowned by a bunny, which honestly might be the most reassuring thing about America.